Welcome to Industry Focus. I'm Nick Sciple. Joining me today is Motley Fool Senior Auto Analyst John Rosevear. John, great to have you back on the show.
Great to be here, Nick.
So it's been a while since I've talked to you on the podcast. It's certainly been a crazy year for all industries. I know you pay close attention to the autos. Can you kind of give us a summary, since the last time we had you on, what has happened across the auto industry?
Well, okay, without focusing on our favorite electric trick maker here. Well, everybody closed their factories in March, and they have been reopening in stages since about the middle of May. What we are starting to see in the market is that pickup truck sales stayed surprisingly resilient through the shutdowns, through April, through May, meaning that dealers are now in short supply. So GM, Ford, and Fiat Chrysler are ramping as quickly as they can while keeping worker safety in mind, because the coronavirus is still out there, to try and get as many pickups as they can to dealers. For them, this is a good and profitable situation. Pickups are profitable. The mix is profitable. Incentives right now are not terribly high. I think there's some pent-up demand that will be filled. Where things go later in the year, if we get to the point where auto factories are consistently rolling, but we're just in a recession, I don't know. We may start to see year-over-year declines in months, August, September, October. But right now, in the next couple of months, things are looking better than I think we all expected 2-3 months ago. Ford forecast a huge loss for the second quarter, and things may not be that bad. I don't think they'll be great, but certainly everybody's trying to ship as many high-profit products as they can before the end of June, and buyers are coming back from what I'm hearing. Used car prices have been very strong, suggesting that people are buying cars of some kind, and I think, again, for the near term at least, we're going to see good strength there.
So you talk about used car prices. One of the other big stories that kind of adjacent to autos that's been in the news has been this Hertz bankruptcy and this idea that, perhaps they might have to liquidate a large number of their vehicles. Do you think that could impact the broader auto market at all?
Not to any meaningful degree. I mean, sure, but I think if they have to dump their cars, the cars will get absorbed. I think demand is really strong. I think the oh my God win for used car Armageddon here is way overblown. I don't think it's going to go that way at all. Consumers are buying, and you may see people who had previously relied on public transportation and maybe don't want to do that for a while. Maybe not investing in a new car, but picking up a used car to drive to work until all of this passes. I think that's very possible.
Yeah, and so at least so far this year, demand is better than expected, given what the crazy disruptions we've seen in the market.
Oh yeah. I think everybody. I think back in March when we saw the factories closing, they were like, nobody's going to sell any cars in the second quarter, and U.S. auto sales were down by roughly half in April. That's bad, but it's still an awful lot of cars and trucks got sold at a time when none of the manufacturers were shipping to dealers. So inventories came down into May, and really shipments didn't really start up until the second half of May. And even then, factories were ramping up slowly. GM's pickup plants are up to full speed. Ford expects everything to be up to full speed, or at least pre-pandemic levels by, I think they said the first week of July. Fiat Chrysler is in a similar position. So, new cars and trucks are coming to dealers. There seems to be demand for pickups at least. We'll sort of see how the second quarter numbers look once we get into July, and then we'll have a better read on what's really going on out there. But it looks, it's not great, but it looks better than we all thought it would be.
So moving on from the auto market more broadly, I want to go to our main story we want to talk about today, which is Nikola Motor. Has gotten a lot of attention, finally completed its SPAC acquisition and officially came public last Thursday under the ticker NKLA. What can you tell us about Nikola high level so far?
Okay, their thing is electric. Their core thing is electric Class 8 trucks. These are tractor trailers. And they've been developing on two parallel tracks hydrogen fuel cell driveline for heavy trucks, as well as a battery electric driveline based around they claim to have an innovative battery that delivers more power with less weight is the key innovation there. They had raised a fair bit of money beforehand. They have a partnership with a big European tractor trailer maker. Their trucks are going to be based on that company's Iveco's architecture. What do we want to know? They had about 230 million in the bank before this deal, which netted them, I forget, something like $600 million. They have a bunch of reservations. We all note that there's no cash deposit required for a reservation, but they do have some big names in there, and they're negotiating with companies like Anheuser-Busch InBev has signed up to buy several hundred of their trucks, for instance. There are some other fleet operators, sizable orders in their reservation book that they're working to convert into cash deposits.
Yeah, and so as it is today, the company does not have production underway, and it's really kind of some prototype vehicles with the prospect to develop a factory, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, their plan is to build a factory in Arizona with help from Iveco. CNH Industrials is the parent company. The stock is CNHI. Iveco is a truck making subsidiary. Iveco is an Italian company controlled by the Agnelli family, the family that founded Fiat. So it's in some ways a sibling of Fiat Chrysler Automobiles and the Ferrari. So I mean, it's a well-capitalized company. It's an established company, and so forth. They have a fairly new Class A semi architecture that as part of this partnership deal that Nikola has struck with them, Nikola will license that. Their plan is to build the first prototypes of the truck, the first production prototypes at Iveco's plant, at an Iveco plant in Germany, I think, and then to start production at their own factory in Arizona, which now that they've raised money, they can begin building by the second half of next year. And that will be, the initial truck will be the battery electric truck. The fuel cell truck follows in 2 years. In parallel, they are building out hydrogen fuel refueling network. A riff on Tesla's supercharger strategy. When Tesla first started selling cars, people said, well, where do we recharge? And Tesla said, well, we have an answer to that. We're building high-speed chargers around the country. Nikola is doing essentially the same thing if you think of refueling a hydrogen fuel cell truck as recharging. They're building their own charging stations for these things around the country. In a couple of years, they will have a reasonable network set up along major routes, and that's when they plan to launch the fuel cell truck.
Yeah, John, I want to kind of go into the partnership aspect of what you mentioned earlier, CNH Industrial. This is something when you look at their presentations, when management speaks, they make a big deal about the importance of their partnerships to their strategy. Why are partnerships so important to them, and maybe for any automaker more broadly?
Because it takes a ton of money and time and resources to develop a new vehicle. By partnering with CNH, they don't have to design the rest of the truck. They don't have to do any of that. What they have to do is focus on what they do best, which is these powertrains, these electric powertrains, and fit them to this existing architecture that was already engineered, that is already optimized for mass production to the extent that Iveco does that, and so forth. It saves them a lot of time and a lot of money. I mean, to develop it from scratch, they'd have to hire up hundreds of engineers, and it would take them, 2, 3, 4 years. And so that is a huge advantage for them. They will build some of these trucks in Europe via a joint venture with CNH later on, but the North American production is all theirs using this design. We pay a licensing fee for the design, presumably, but the special sauce, the electric drivetrain and software and so forth, is all theirs.
So I guess the drivetrain and the software is Nikola's, and then the kind of shell that goes into is CNH. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, I mean, that's the frame, the cab, the so forth, like that. The trucky truck parts, and that kind of stuff is it looks like no big deal maybe to some of us. Oh, how hard can it be to manufacture a tractor trailer? Well, to meet regulations all over the world, to get optimized, the traditional diesel business, fuel economy and so forth, safety regulations and so forth, durability and all that. That takes a lot of engineering, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of time. That is something that Nikola, via this partnership, won't have to duplicate on its upcoming trucks. So it's huge.
So when we look at the market opportunity for Nikola, what is the impetus for customers to come to Nikola versus traditional truck makers, and what's their opportunity for them to grow as there's this push to maybe more green trucking?
Well, I mean, the promise, the selling case is that the total cost of ownership will be lower, and if you're burning hydrogen is cheap. Nikola's plan, I think, is to lease the trucks and make fueling at their stations free. It's hard to argue with that if you're operating a fleet of 800 big rigs. You don't have to buy diesel anymore. With hydrogen refueling, you don't have to wait hours and hours to recharge these trucks. They can pull in, be off for 15, 20 minutes while they refuel. Driver gets a cup of coffee and a sandwich and it's back on the road. So that sort of thing, if the reliability is there, if the durability is there, total cost of ownership could look very good on this. Plus, it's zero emissions, and they get to say it's zero emissions. And there's some marketing spin that can go with that. Our trucks are electric now. For some companies, that kind of being able to say that is important. Our environmental impact comes down because our delivery fleet isn't burning diesel fuel anymore. The emissions from the fuel cell, a hydrogen fuel cell, it's water vapor, and it's clean enough that you can capture it and drink it. Even there's no smoke, there's no smog, there's no CO2.
And following up along those sides of emissions, Nikola is touting a plan to use renewable energy to generate the hydrogen that will refuel the trucks, so that from all the way through the supply chain, the fuel is being generated in a green way. This is similar to what Tesla has said they would do in the past when it comes to powering all their superchargers via solar. When you look at this plan, what do you make of it?
Well, we're a little out of my expertise here. There are people who know a lot more about hydrogen manufacturing than I do, but they tell me that it's going to be a long time before the supply chain is really green. To the extent that Nikola makes efforts and investments in that direction, that's a net boon. But don't expect it to be 100% green tomorrow, just as Tesla's electricity for its supercharger system 100% green right now either. In fact, when they have trouble, sometimes you see a diesel generator powering the superchargers, which is, I mean, on the one hand, it's terrible. On the other hand, it's what do they got to do to keep their customers on the road in that spot right there? It's not a purely green chain yet. Is it better? Sure. I mean, because the emissions from the trucks are down. Making diesel fuel and gasoline has its own environmental cost as well. What's the balance? How much better? I don't know offhand.
Okay, we've talked about their semi trucks that they're planning to build, the battery electric vehicle in 2021 and the fuel cell electric vehicle in 2023. The other vehicle that Nikola has really been advertising heavily has been its Badger pickup truck that it plans to release. What can you tell us about that vehicle?
I can't tell you much because there isn't much. What I can tell you is what they've said about it, which is that I think the idea is that it will have both a fuel cell and a battery, not a huge battery, but that it'll be able to get 300 miles of range on battery only, so maybe it is a fairly big battery, and 600 miles with the fuel cell working as kind of a power adder. So it's a sort of a fuel cell battery hybrid, I think is the idea here. They promise lots and lots and lots of power and torque and lots of hauling capability, and that it will beat up a Ford F-150 and steal its lunch money, among other things. Nobody has seen this truck yet. They're planning some sort of event, some sort of reveal event. It's the end of the month. I think it's the 28th or 29th, but we can find that out for you. So what to make of it, I don't know. I do know this, that we should remember that Nikola is a fairly small company. It's only a few hundred people, and they apparently don't have much in the way of resources devoted to engineering this truck right now. So I'm not sure it's much more than a good idea that they're looking for another partner to help them with. Will they end up building this on, one of the Detroit automakers architectures like they're doing with the big rigs? I think that's a possibility. The family connection through Exor, perhaps they have an in at Fiat Chrysler. I don't know. I haven't heard anything, and I haven't seen any signs that they actually have a partnership signed yet. And I think Trevor Milton, the founder and chairman, said something the other day that they don't have a partnership deal yet, but they're in talks with, unspecified automakers.
Yeah, that's my understanding, is that they plan to contract with other manufacturers to help build the truck, which is interesting that they've taken some shots at Ford in the past week, given that they might need to do business with them. But it is interesting that they're saying that they will start taking pre-orders on June 29th, and that folks who pre-order will get priority access tickets to the Nikola World 2020 conference. So if folks who are big advocates for the company, to draw in to purchasing the vehicle. We'll see what plays out there. When you look at Trevor Milton, founder and CEO of the company, I looked up this morning on S&P Capital, like he owns 25% of the stock. I believe Citron Research, the short sellers, took some unkind shots at him in this past week. When you look at Trevor Milton, what do you make of him as a founder of the company and current chairman?
I can't say I know him well. I haven't really talked to him yet. I've had a couple friendly exchanges with him on Twitter, but I don't really know the guy personally yet. What I can say is he got them this far, and where they are. Valuation of the stock is a completely separate question. But as a company, they have a real shot to do this, and he founded this and he got them this far. He got the partnerships in place to do it. He's got a production plan. He's got an engineering team. He's got, significant interest from fleet operators. He's got demo trucks. He got them this far. He has done a good job to lead the company this far, and now he has handed off day-to-day management to Mark Russell, who comes from Alcoa and Worthington, I think. And was brought in, I think, last fall to sort of be the professional manager to take it to the next level, while Trevor kicks himself upstairs as sort of chairman and product visionary, which honestly is also a very smart move for a guy whose background is mostly in startups and so forth. He's not, he doesn't have the experience to run a big truck company, but he did have sort of the self-awareness and the humility to bring in somebody who did, maybe under pressure from his investors, but still, he has readily agreed to it. He's kind of become the voice of the company out on social media in the last week or two. He has not been quiet. He seems like a friendly guy. Go engage him. He's chatty. That's not a knock against him. I think in some of the things he said, I see his limitations in terms of the company becoming really huge. He's like, oh, customers can always talk to me on Twitter. Well, if you're selling 20,000 pickups a month, you don't want to be that guy to talk to you on Twitter when, the battery door won't close, or the touch screen goes bad, or whatever. You don't want that. I think Elon Musk has taken that on to some extent, and I don't think he wants it either. So I think in some ways, Trevor Milton doesn't quite really, have the depth of experience in this sort of part of the world to really see what's coming. On the other hand, he's well-intentioned, and as I said, he got them this far.
So would you say kind of his transition into the chairman role as the company growing up into this full production, we're past the startup phase, and now we need to really institute a manufacturing culture, make these partnerships at scale, and really start delivering this product?
It does seem like that. They've got their chief engineer has background at both Daimler, the German parent company of Mercedes-Benz, and at Tesla. So he has presumably ridden this bus, this sort of go-to-market with a product ride before. They've got a professional team. They've got people with auto industry experience. They've got people with consumer product experience. They've got people with safety experience. They've got people with electronics and electric vehicle and software experience. It seems like it seems like the right kind of team you want to make this effort, to take this shot. Uh, I think we're at the point, where let's see how the products look when they're beyond the prototype phase, and let's see how they're received in the marketplace. And at the same time, let's be aware there are other companies coming into this space as well before we get too excited about their opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that brings us to the investment case for the company today and the valuation. I mean, when you look at the financials, uh, they say they have $10 billion in reservations for potential revenue, assuming all their contracted leases for their fuel cell EV come through. We got $10 billion in revenue. However, that would be out in 2023. You look at the market cap today, I pulled it up, $22 billion. So we're trading at, what is that, 2x 2023 revenue, maybe. So when you look at the valuation today relative to the potential of the company, what are your thoughts there?
Like many things in the current market, it's a little hard to justify. This is a company that has no revenue, and they may have a little revenue in 2021. I don't think they're going to get 10 billion revenue all at once. I think that if all those orders convert, that's over several years, because I don't think they can fill them in less than 3 years or so. So spread that out. They may hit $1 billion of revenue in 2022. There's no real chance they'll hit it before then. And they seem to have a solid product. People who have seen their technology seem to like it. They have secured significant investments. How it holds up in the real world, none of us know yet. We also don't completely know what the playing field is going to look like when these trucks start to ship. Daimler has been working on electric trucks for several years now, and they're a serious heavy truck player. Tesla and its semi is kind of a wild card. When will that arrive, and in what quantity, and how will that be received? We joke a lot about Tesla and its valuation, but Tesla is a heavy hitter here compared to Nikola. I mean, they've been out there building vehicles for a decade now, so we have to take them at least somewhat seriously, even if we don't know their timing or how extensively prototypes their product has been. And then with this pickup, on the pickup side, if you taunt Ford Motor Company is going to come back at you, especially in pickups. They will defend that franchise vigorously. They have an investment in Rivian, which is sort of the upscale electric pickup truck maker, another company with very impressive leadership and partnerships and engineering that appears to be going about this the right way, with lessons learned from others along the way. So that market. My take on Nikola's Badger pickup is that if they can get a partner and get it to market within a couple of years, they are not really likely to threaten Ford or GM or Fiat Chrysler very much. But they might beat up Tesla's Cybertruck a little bit if they're going to make it that into production. So we have to consider that this is not a wide open playing field. It may look like one now, but we're talking 2 to 3 years out before, they're really ramped up and producing trucks. And there are other people who are, in similar spots, who investors excited about Nikola might not really know about. And so, there is a significant potential market for these trucks. Nikola has a promising product on the way, but it's way too early for this to be a $20 billion company. I think we all know that on some level.
Yeah, obviously, when you're looking at a company that its vehicles are in prototype mode, revenue is essentially zero. Certainly, a lot of execution risk over the next few years. Not to mention, that very high market cap that we mentioned earlier. If you had to guess, where do you think Nikola will be in 5 years, John?
I think there's a good chance they'll do it. That they will have secured a market. That they will be profitable. The Class 8 market is not that huge, which is obviously why they're talking about the pickup too, because you're not going to get hockey stick growth over the long term selling tractor trailers. The fleet of them is not nearly as big as with passenger cars, and they last a long time. There are trucks on the road that are 20 years old, 30 years old, or more, and they're in daily service. if the total cost of ownership case is compelling, then you will see big fleets switching over time, but they will not be the only game in town. They are up against at least one or two competitors who have significant fleet sales experience, relationships with major fleet operators that go back years and years, and so forth. And if you're, if you have a fleet of 800 trucks, and your orders are to go electric, and you have a choice of dealing with, say, Daimler, who you've dealt with for 20 years, and they deliver and they'll be around, or Nikola, you may not choose Nikola. And Nikola is going to, until Nikola has proven itself and proven that, it's there for parts and service, and that it's there, that there's somebody knowledgeable on the other end of the phone when you call them up and need help. That takes time. So they're going to have to establish that too. I think the idea that every truck in the world is going to be Nikola in 5 years is a little much. On the other hand, I mean, there is definitely a route for this company, if it continues to execute and deliver, to take some real market share and have a thriving, profitable business. How big is that business? It's a little hard to say right now.
And what would you need? I mean, it obviously sounds like, given the execution risk, given the competition, the valuation today, not incredibly excited about jumping in right now. What would you want to see before you'd be excited to invest?
Good question. I mean, I thought at 15, 20 bucks, this was intriguing. At 50, 60, 70 bucks, it's whoa, wait a minute, way ahead of yourself. I think what I'd want to see is, I mean, I haven't done all the work around this to really size the potential market opportunity realistically. I would want to do that, first of all. More broadly, I would want to see that the truck really is being well received by fleet operators who've seen a prototype, who've seen the technology. I would want to see that Iveco is playing its part in the partnership, that it's still enthusiastic about this, which would suggest to me that what Nikola is doing in terms of engineering and in terms of bringing that engineering to market is still on track and is still positive. And $10 billion in reservations is sort of a great number for your roadshow, but there's no cash there yet. I want to start to hear Nikola confirm, okay, this is a solid order, and we've taken $300 million in deposits for 2,000 trucks for this fleet. Those are made up numbers, but you know what I mean. That there is actual cash coming in, that there are actual deposits, that there is actual intent to buy, there are signed contracts, and so forth. That they will have deliveries right out of the gate, and ideally some depth in their order book so that they are filling orders several months out. Once I see that, I'm going to start to say, okay, this is a real company. Now the counter argument to that is, whoa, this is a startup. You'll miss the boat if you do that, and there may be some of that, but now it's a gamble. Right now, it's a gamble. Certainly, the current valuation. Things look good. They seem to have the right pieces, but will they execute on time? And what valuation will the market give them once they're not an exciting startup, but they're a truck maker? And once they have, if they have stable market share and so forth, I don't think the valuation. I don't think it's a $20 billion company. Now, what happens with the pickups? Do they form a joint venture with somebody and maybe, have a low effort revenue stream out of that, leveraging the technology they're already developing for the big roads? That could make it more interesting. I think at minimum, I would wait and see what Trevor and company say at the end of the month about the pickup truck. Maybe we check back in a month. I mean, it's a gamble right now. It really is a gamble. I personally don't feel comfortable investing in gambles. If you do, dig into this thing. But, there's a lot of risk here. And delivering on the present valuation seems like a bit of a long shot, at least within the next few years, certainly.
Yeah, John, I feel similar to Nikola, the way I felt a few months back about Virgin Galactic. Certainly lots of promise about the potential market that could grow out of this, but you've got a company that hasn't get delivered a product to customers. And at the very least, I'd like to see them do that and show that customers are satisfied before I want to jump in, particularly at today's valuation, when we're nipping on the heels of some really significant automakers. But John, thanks as always for hopping on the show and sharing all your knowledge with us.
Thank you.
As always, people on the program may own companies discussed on the show, and the Motley Fool may have formal recommendations for or against the stocks discussed. So don't buy or sell anything based solely on what you hear. Thanks to Austin Morgan for making it sound so good. For John Rosevear, I'm Nick Sciple. Thanks for listening, and Fool on.